Welcome all, thank you for joining. We are going to get started here in just a couple minutes. Just want to make sure everyone has a chance to log on and get situated. So thank you so much for your patience. We'll wait maybe just 30 more seconds here to make sure everyone has a chance to get logged in. Looks like we're almost there. Okay. I think we have everyone situated. Hi again, all. My name is Dave Javid with Plan to Place, part of the consultant team, and you are here as part of our 5th workshop in a series of 6. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Adam Wolf to do a welcome and get us started.
Hello again, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm using my Pious Drive fall colors as a background as we're in our new town hall space. So I'll give a little pitch. Anybody who wants to come to town hall and get departmental services, we're down at 240 Tamil Plaza, or I'm sorry, and it's at Suite 110. So it's sort of the northern portion of Corte, Madera. Come see us. And as Dave said, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. For those of you who've participated in previous workshops, thank you for doing so, and thanks for coming again. Just to reiterate, the discussions we've had and feedback that we've received really over the last 4 workshops has been really incredible and incredibly helpful to our understanding of the issues around housing in Corte Madera and the direction of our work. So if you've missed any of the previous workshops, you can always catch up by visiting our website at cortemaderahousing.org and watch previous presentations, access a ton of other good information about our planning, our housing planning process. Just for example, if you want to know more about the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, RHNA, which is going to be the focus of tonight's presentation and discussion, and sort of understand why Corte Madera's RHNA is much higher than in recent decades, along with pretty much every other city in Marin and Bay Area. Christina O'Rourke, who's with us here tonight as well, but she gave a great presentation at our last workshop on RHNA, and you can review that information when convenient. So I just want to remind people this is a year-plus long process we still have remaining. So just because it feels like we may be nearing the end of our housing element workshop series, again, we're at 5 of 6, doesn't mean that you won't have additional public meetings or opportunities for public comment and discussion in the future. And really the workshop series is intended to be an educational resource. So please take advantage of what's on our website, and the information will remain up for your use. All right, so we can see we're at our 5th workshop, as I've said now a couple of times. Tonight is really about trying to solidify the town's strategy for meeting our regional housing needs allocation, otherwise known as RHNA. This is the 2nd meeting to discuss our strategy. And as a reminder, all cities and counties must meet their RHNA by identifying properties, what we call housing opportunity sites, that could be developed for housing over the next 8 years, or within the period timeframe we're looking at is 2023 to 2031. And then ensuring that the housing unit density allowed on these properties when added together is equal to or greater than the assigned number of units, the RHNA, the 700 plus units we've been talking about since day 1 of this process. So again, the town doesn't build them or finance them, but we need to modify zoning regulations to allow for the required number of housing units to be developed. So we want to leave plenty of time to hear from you. So let's go right to the next slide and talk about the agenda tonight. We've done the welcome and introductions. Martha Battaglia, who you likely have heard from and many of you know, we'll be providing a presentation, sort of a recap of last workshop's information. We'll try to do that succinctly. And then we really wanted to provide an opportunity for discussion and also for staff to respond to some of the comments and that we've heard over the last several months, and in particular with respect to the site inventory analysis and some of the sites we've chosen. We've had some really great feedback, not only at our last workshops, but also at some of our in-person pop-up workshops at Town Center and at the Nugget Market. And then we're gonna hear from you and talk about next steps. So with that, I think we can move into your back to you, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam. Yeah, so just as a reminder, as we move through this evening's presentation, the chat window will be open. So definitely please feel free to leave us any chat comments that you might have in the chat window. We'll practice that here in a second. We're also going to have discussion pauses throughout the meeting, one particularly at the end, so that we can do a verbal communication with you all as well. At that point, we'll use the hand raise feature, and to access that, you can either go through the participant window and you'll find a hand raise there, and or depending on the version of Zoom you're using, if you go to your reactions, you should also be able to find the raise hand there. And once you use that raise hand, we'll go ahead and unmute you and you can contribute. So as we always do at the beginning of these meetings, we like to do poll questions just to understand who's joining us here this evening. We ask a series of demographic questions that we ask at every single meeting to kind of track who we've talked to and who we need to continue to reach out to make sure that we get all perspectives represented at these meetings. And before we do that, we just wanted to go ahead and test out the chat. I love that Martha set this up. This is always really fun to allow you all to kind of test it out and let us know, in this case, providing one word that describes living or working in Corte Madera. So if you want to drop that comment into chat for us, that would be great. And that'll just kind of get us warmed up and ready to leave input as we move through the discussion. So before we go ahead and move the discussion, though, we're going to go ahead and do that live poll. So I'm going to pop back here, and Martha, I'm going to actually ask for your help because there's something weird happening. Oh, you know what? Actually, I just got it back. Sorry, that was perfect timing. My toolbar somehow went away for a second, but now it's back. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that demographic poll now. You'll see that pop up on your screen. And here, again, are just standard questions that we always ask, just to get a sense of who's with us, including where do you live, where do you work, which of the following best describes why you're attending tonight's workshop, what your housing situation is, obviously, as we're talking about housing here tonight, what type of housing you may live in, and then again, demographic questions around age, ethnicity, and income. So I'm going to give you all a few seconds here, or at least another 20, 30 seconds here to go ahead and work your way through the demographics. And maybe while I do that, I could read off a couple of the great chats that you all left for us. Awesome. Everything from wonderful to paradise to heaven on earth. Wow. Special, beautiful, non-diverse. Okay, that's good to hear. And friendly. So awesome. You all are chat experts. That was great. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Let's see here. Maybe we'll take 20 more seconds or so here. It looks like about half of you thus far have taken the time to take the demographic poll. And no problem if for some reason you aren't able to access this, we can circle back on this information as well. So thank you for your patience for those who have taken the survey, or the poll, excuse me. Let's see. Maybe I'll wait 10 more seconds here. Almost there. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead, I think, and close it unless anyone, I'll look at the videos, unless anyone's having trouble access it or needs additional time. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll, and then I'm gonna share it back out with you all so that you can see the results along with me. Go ahead and end it now, share the results. So you can see just real quickly here, 100% of those that answered live here in Corte Madera as expected. Work in Corte Madera, about a third of you are otherwise retired and unemployed, about a half. A pretty good mix of why you were attending. You were able to select all that applied here. You want to know more about housing, you support housing, you're concerned about housing. All great topics that will be addressed here tonight. All of you own a home. Okay, a good mix of age and, okay, great. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing now. Thank you so much for taking the time to take that poll with us. And we are now going to go ahead and move into the presentation. And I'm gonna hand it over to Martha.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for attending tonight's workshop. We appreciate your participation in this workshop series. I will be providing an overview of Corte Madera's site inventory plan and also our plan to meet Arena. This is an overview of the information that was presented at last workshop. So for those of you who are here in January, a lot of this will look familiar. So we've gone over the planning framework for housing opportunity sites at the last few workshops, but it is worth going over again as this does form the backbone of the draft site inventory plan that we'll be talking about tonight. Planning staff has developed a framework for identifying potential housing opportunity sites in town. And the sites that have been identified have been chosen because they have less impact on the more established residential neighborhoods in town. These sites are located along commercial corridors and they're close to freeways, and as a result, they do not draw a lot of vehicular traffic into the established neighborhoods. And many of the sites that we have identified also are developed with older commercial buildings. And redevelopment of these sites would improve both the appearance and the quality of these properties. And at the December workshop, we heard from several property owners of some other thoughts about potentially redeveloping some of these commercial sites. And many of the sites, one of the sites in particular, the Macy site, kind of represents this trend we're seeing about modernizing commercial centers to take advantage of some of these new trends. And one of the trends that we've seen at some of these kind of commercial centers is the introduction of residential. And this results in kind of some of the tenants shifting and also having businesses that can operate throughout both the day and evening. And lastly, one of our goals was, to the extent practical, to be consistent with our existing land use policies. And of the 9 sites that have been selected, all of them actually currently do allow residential uses. Next slide. So this slide shows the 9 sites that have been identified by planning staff. And we've discussed these sites at the last 2 workshops, and we've also discussed them at some of the recent pop-up events that we've had. So the feedback we've received from the community on the suitability of these sites has been very positive for the most part. There was a survey that we did at our December workshop, and then the survey was also available on our webpage. And as part of that survey, individuals could indicate the suitability of these particular sites for housing. And of the individuals that took the survey, the results were about 70 to 80% that these sites were suitable or somewhat suitable, and 15% said that they were not suitable or somewhat not suitable. As Adam mentioned, we did have a few pop-up workshops in the month of January. We were at the town center in early January and then more recently at the Nugget Market. And the feedback we received from individuals that we spoke with at these events were very similar to the survey results that we received as well. Next slide. So at the January workshop, we talked about how we expect to meet Arena. And this will be done through single-family homes, accessory dwelling units, and the majority will be multi-family units. And multifamily units will be divided into the different income targets that are required by the state. And this includes very low, low, moderate, and above moderate units. Next slide. So after we identified our 9 housing sites, we then started looking at what densities were appropriate for these different sites. So you can see this map has been color-coded into 3 different colors. The yellow represents densities of 20 to 25, the orange is 30 to 35, and the red is 40. So as a first step, we looked at the context of these sites, looking at the type of development that already existed on the site and also what was surrounding these different sites. And so as part of that, we formed these 3 different densities of what we felt was appropriate for these sites given the existing context. So again, the yellow is the least dense, and then these sites tend to be adjacent to or kind of within residential neighborhoods, and so staff did not feel that higher density and larger buildings were appropriate for these sites. The orange sites can achieve a higher density and a little bit bigger buildings, and this is because they're generally located in commercial areas that already have larger buildings. These sites also tend to be larger in area as well, and they're generally closer to the highway. And the last site is the Macy site, which is the only site proposed with a density of 40 dwelling units an acre. And there's a variety of reasons that make this an attractive site for a higher density. And this includes the fact that it's not adjacent to any residential development. It's in close proximity to Highway 101 and also to transportation. And it also could support, could revitalize the village center and add kind of a different mix of uses that residential could support. And at the December workshop, John Steckley from Macy spoke about the energy that introducing residential could have on the village as a whole. This property is also the largest site at 7.5 acres, and so the size allows for the town to meet a significant portion of our RHNA. Next slide. Again, so this slide shows the 9 different sites, and the sites are broken into the different categories, the lower, medium, and high densities. Again, the yellow shows 20 to 25, orange is 30 to 35, and again, the red is the 40 dwelling units an acre. And you'll notice that a lot of the units are at the Macy site. Given the large size of that site and at a density of 40 units an acre, we could achieve 300 units. And again, the staff feels this is an appropriate site for a larger housing project for the reasons that we just discussed. And a prior slide showed that we would meet our RHNA through 625 units. And you'll notice that what is shown on this table exceeds that number by almost 100. And this is intentional. It is possible that some of our sites may drop out. For example, if we're not able to support and to provide enough evidence to the state that it's likely that a housing project could be developed on one of these sites. And also, if in the future we receive a project at a lower density than what we have anticipated, it is good to have a buffer so that the housing element would still be in compliance with state regulations. Next slide. So since our last workshop, an additional parcel has been added to Site 4, and that is 2 Pfeiffer Avenue. 2 Pfeiffer Avenue is approximately 1.1 acres, and it's currently developed with an office building. This parcel is also owned by the Jacobitz family, which own the other 3 parcels that comprise Site 4. And they've indicated that if they were to redevelop this site, they would likely include all 4 parcels. And so this addition of this parcel creates a combined size of just under 3.5 acres, and it adds approximately 30 more units to this site. Next slide. So these next few slides break up the different sites into these different density ranges that we've been discussing. Again, sites 1, 5, and 9 have a density range 20 to 25. And this slide shows some of the representative images of developments we may see at this type of density range. And the purpose of these pictures are to provide an understanding of the scale that could likely result. However, they are meant to only be a reference, and they're just want to make it really clear that there's no proposal at any of these sites for the development. Next slide. And so as part of our analysis, we didn't want to just look at the numbers. We also wanted to have an understanding of what the different densities at the different sites, what kind of projects it could result in as far as building size and building scale. So staff has been working with Opticoast Design to help test conceptually some of the different densities of what they could likely look like at some of these different sites. So as part of the site testing, Opticoast utilized our multifamily design standards, and these have been developed over the last 2 years. So these standards were applied to several of the sites as they developed potential conceptual site plans. So this shows a conceptual site plan of 601 Pious Drive, and this is developed with the former mortuary. The site includes 2 different parcels. There's the parcel that includes the building and then also an adjacent parking area. So this site is just under half an acre and resulted in 10 units, which is an approximate density of 20 dwelling units. Next slide. So 5 of the proposed sites have a density of 30 to 35 dwelling units per acre, which includes sites 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8. And we have several types of these buildings already in Corte Madera. Development within this density range would likely consist of 2 to 3 stories of residential above over parking or commercial. And again, these pictures are meant to be reference only. Next slide. This conceptual site testing was shown at the last workshop. It is for 41 Tamil Vista, and it's an example of what 30 units an acre might look like at site 2. And so for this particular site, Opticoast used both the objective design development standards, and they also used the town's existing mixed-use zoning, which was approved maybe 5 or so years ago. And one of the things that the zoning requires is it requires smaller buildings in the front portion of the site. And this is because there's residential uses across Tamil Vista. And then in the rear of the site, larger buildings are allowed. So this conceptual site plan shows a mixed-use building in the front, which is 1 story of commercial with the 1 floor of residential above, and then a larger building in the rear of the site, which is 3 levels of residential above parking. And by siting the larger building in the back portion of the site, it's largely shielded by the buildings up front. Next slide. And the Opticoast also did a site testing for 10 Pfeiffer and 110 and 150 Allen. This site again was developed as a mixed-use site, including commercial and residential in the buildings adjacent to Pfeiffer, and then smaller residential buildings adjacent to Nellen. So for this site testing, it was developed at approximately 35 dwelling units an acre and resulted in 83 units. Next slide. And again, the village is the only site proposed with a density of 40 dwelling units an acre. Tam Ridge, which is shown at the top picture, was a recent project built at 40 dwelling units an acre. And for this particular project, it consists of 3 stories of residential above either commercial or parking. And again, these pictures are meant to be referenced. And next slide. So this is a proposed development at the Northgate Mall in San Rafael. And this is a project currently under consideration by the City of San Rafael, and it's a project that includes both residential and commercial. The residential component is 5-story multifamily residential buildings that have a height of 60 feet. And we think it shows images of kind of an example of the type of scale you may see at Macy's site developed at 40 dwelling units an acre. The Macy site is obviously a large site, so there could be a variety of different options, design options for how that site actually could be developed. And then, the Northgate project is also a local example of how a shopping center is transitioning to include housing. That's something, we're seeing throughout the Bay Area, and it's, this is a local example of a project in Marin. Next slide. Okay, so with that, I think we're going to turn it over to clarifying questions. Focus on the presentation I just did, and you can write your questions in the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Martha. We did have a couple questions come in. I'll just make a quick note. There was a question whether we made any changes to the site since the last meeting. And you might have noticed Adam did answer that to say we have not made any changes. But this is just a recap, just to make sure that those who might be joining us here this evening have an opportunity to get up to speed. And we're really here to hear any other thoughts or comments you all might have. And Adam will recap some of the comments that we received thus far here shortly as well. So thank you for that question. And Pat, I see your hand raised. I also saw that you left a comment in the chat. We were hoping to do this first portion mainly through chat, but since we don't have a lot of hand raised, you can, if you want to go ahead and verbalize your comment, you're welcome to. I'll ask you to unmute.
Oh, thank you. I did not know that I had raised my hand. So,
okay, good practice.
That was that was an error.
Okay, no problem.
So you can keep going with what you're doing. Keep going.
Okay, thank you so much, Pat. Appreciate it. I'll just note that you were interested in possibly promoting developer community partnerships so the community gets amenities in exchange for approval. I think that's a really pertinent comment. It's something we'll kind of continue to talk about as we move through this evening's presentations as well. So thank you for that, Pat. So with that, I don't see, oh, go ahead, Adam. Yes.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, do we want to answer this now or try to just respond?
Sure, you're welcome to, yeah.
Oh yeah, Pat, I think that's a great comment. I think one of the great things about what we're trying to do through this process is be more proactive about the type of projects and development we want to see. So we're informing actually development that may occur in the future rather than responding to it and getting something proposed and then we have to sort of respond. So things like whether some of these things are financially able to be done by the private property owner or not. That's a question for actually when development pro formas are actually developed by the private property owner. But certainly if we make it clear that certain amenities are desired, that's always something that when we get calls from developers, they want it. The first thing they ask the planners is, what is going to be supported, by the community and things like that. So I think as we've seen with the hotel project recently, that was the one where we sort of talked about what is important to the town and encoded or embedded that in certain policies, and then got a response from the developer in that case. And I think similar processes could be followed as part of this housing element plan. But now certainly, obviously, it's got to. It is a conversation, put it that way, between the private property owner and then the town and others in the community. Yeah. So anything else, Dave, you think we should respond to?
There's one question, and maybe we could address here quickly, and then I think you're going to hit on some of the other comments that are coming in through the chat. But actually, you'll hit on this comment here shortly too. But one question is, what if the town doesn't meet the proposed numbers? I know you're going to talk through that as we get through the presentation, but I don't know if you want to address that really quick right now. Then we can move on.
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of, I guess the clarifying question would be in terms of actually building the units. The units
I think it might be around meeting the RENA numbers in general.
Yeah, so essentially we have to meet the RHNA numbers in order to have a compliant and certified housing element by the state Department of Housing and Community Development. If we don't, there are penalties that have become more stringent and more direct over the last several years because of the housing shortage in the state, at least as determined by the state. And so there are more potential penalties and legal action that can be taken for cities that don't actually obtain compliance with state law with respect to updating their housing element to meet RHNA. So there's also potentially loss of funding or not being able to obtain funding for things such as transportation and transportation improvements and things that we use to sort of improve our infrastructure. More and more, the state is tying their funding. The carrots are tied to compliant housing element. So it's a couple of the things that in response.
Great, thanks, Adam. And then I think you're going to hit on some of the other questions that are coming up in the presentation as well, so we can come back to those again towards the end.
Yeah, and I think some of this about the sites is exactly the type of things we want to hear when we stop our side of the presentation and hear from you. So we'll just move on to the next. So, you know, we did want to specifically, given all the time and energy that I know all of you have spent sort of watching these presentations, at the last workshop, we did open it up for discussion. And as Martha said, we had 2 pop-up workshops, both in person at the town center. Thank you, Monty Stevens, I see you're out there. And also at the Nugget Market. If the Nugget Market's out there, thanks as well. But we heard in those conversations, we were able to get into a little bit more depth in terms of what comments people had. And we certainly heard a lot of support for the approach we were taking and the framework under which we were identifying sites for potential housing development. But we also wanted to take this time to give a voice to some of the concerns we heard. And so, you know, we wanted to actually do that here. And so this is just a slide that sort of just pulls some quotes from both, I think, the workshop summaries that from the last workshop, and also from quotes that we heard from people at the last these pop-up in-person workshops. And here's some photos of those events that we had. And you know, together at both of those, we really got into conversations with about 55 individuals. So it was really a great opportunity to hear and get into a little bit more involved conversation with folks. If you want to see the full summaries of those and see all of the comments we got, those are all those summaries. Thanks to Plan to Place are on our website, and they've done a great job of sort of summarizing the comments. But the big one, as you might expect, is that we heard about, especially when we were over at the Nugget, and also at the last workshop with respect to Paradise Drive, and you could just go to the next slide. It's always a concern. It's traffic. Traffic is sort of the top priority for a lot of our residents in terms of just a quality of life issue. It's an existing issue at certain times of day, but of course, when we bring up a conversation about new development, it certainly is also something that people get concerned about. So we thought it would be good to share some information that we think is relevant when thinking about traffic concerns and this housing plan. There's certainly not a silver bullet here, but it's also a regional issue. But we do think an ongoing multi-pronged approach and really coming at this issue of traffic from multiple angles can address the concerns and some of the fears that people have about traffic associated with additional development. And of course, further, this is certainly something that we're going to be studying as part of our environmental analysis of the housing element, and we can talk about that more at the end of the presentation. So next slide. This is a slide, and really I meant to have a title block here, but one of the first things what we did when we identified the site, and hopefully you can see this, really all that's important, we overlaid some of the bus routes and some of the major transit stops, both along the highway, but in these little white circles, and then of course Larkspur Landing to the north. But we really, the first step is identifying sites that at least are give people who may live at these locations the opportunity to use public transit if they so choose. And so these sites, more than pretty much any other sites in Corte Madera, other than, you know, it sort of follows the Tam Ridge model of locating near highway and transit to the extent that people want to use it. And especially the ones at the north, as infrastructure gets improved, in terms of the walkway and bike ped from Larkspur Landing into Corte Madera, certainly those are becoming more accessible, and the smart train and the Larkspur Landing ferry by foot or bike as well. So that's one strategy, is just locate these new development as at least as close as possible to the best available public transit. Next slide. Then coming at this from bike and ped improvements. I mean, this is an alternative mode of transportation that we often don't think of, but certainly for local trips, more and more, this is something that the town's been focusing on through its bike and ped committee, public works, the town council. And so if you know, recently, just as an example, there was a sidewalk widening project that was constructed on Paradise Drive, connecting the existing footpath on San Clemente Drive to Paradise and down to Seawolf Passage. This was completed in January 2022. Next slide. It's part of a Safe Routes to School program. And if you go out there, really, I mean, we were even just being out at the Nugget, but there are a lot more people walking and using this path, and people going, you know, riding their bikes. I'm amazed to see how many people are riding their bikes past us here now at our new town hall location onto Warnham, and then using the Redwood Path to get to the residential areas on the bay side of Corte Madera. Next slide. In addition, you know, the town is working on Paradise Drive and Complete Streets projects all the way to the town limit. You know, this is something that there's been several public meetings on recently. Again, trying to create pedestrian and bicycle facilities that are much more usable and user-friendly, so that local trips can at least people have the option to take local trips without using their vehicle. And that's one way of addressing traffic. Next slide. This is just some of the information related to that. I'm going to go fairly quickly. Next slide, please. And we can come back to these if you have questions. One important thing, you know, as we talked about bike ped, transit, but of course there's also the roadways and the streets that vehicles use to move around town. And one of the areas I wanted to focus on, and folks may not be aware, that there is what we call a village improvement fund that is specifically tied to development at the village and is meant to address roadway conditions at the intersection of San Clemente Drive and Redwood Highway and Pious Drive. It's sometimes the terminus of Pious there. And so it really, this came up actually quite a bit when we talked about at the last workshop, and when we were over at the village, Nugget Market, you know, that gets a bottleneck, especially during school hours. And can back up quite a bit, and so that was a concern that we heard from folks. These are also concerns of ours, but it is worth noting, if you go to the next slide, that the 2009 general plan, the town's 2009 general plan, did require traffic mitigation associated with future development at the village, and so as new projects are developed, and this would go for anything developed at the Macy site as well, projects are required to make a fair share contribution to fund mitigation measure for this intersection to improve traffic flow through that intersection. Nordstrom and RH Gallery, those projects paid into this fund. We had a cost estimate of about $2.7 million to complete this project. In the next slide, will show a conceptual drawing of actually what would be changed as part of that mitigation measure. And so you start to see a right turn only lane, essentially four turning lanes at San Clemente Drive, going on to three of them making a left onto Pious, one making a right onto Old Redwood Highway, three additional through lanes on Pious eastbound, all with the understanding that with additional development, there's going to be need to make some improvements to some of the roadway configurations. Next slide. And then I wanted to spend a little bit of time also, another angle that we come at traffic improvements is from actually just monitoring and assessing and trying to get information and an understanding of where and why issues may be occurring with respect to traffic. So one of the things that the town did and we did at the planning department in 2019, next slide, is to conduct a post-occupancy report at related to the Tam Ridge development and that project to really get a better understanding of what the impacts were related to local traffic and parking conditions as a result of that development. We wanted specifically to use that information to aid future policy and other discussions related to housing. So it's essentially, we're using it, tonight to actually talk about traffic related to housing development and mixed use development. And really this was also something that I think we embedded in the approvals for this project, a requirement that we get an understanding of some of the information about who's living there, commuting patterns, parking issues from the developer, so that we can bring information to bear and sort of better informed about how to solve some of these issues. So I do think it's worth spending a little bit of time. Some of you may be familiar with this report. We presented it to the town council in 2019. The IJ followed up with it with an article themselves. So next slide. This project, it was, as many of you know, it's a large, I think it may be the largest apartment project in Corte Madera, 180 units, had 10% below market rate units. It also includes 3,000 square feet of a local market shopping center, store, 40 dwelling units an acre. So as Martha noted, that's sort of the upper end of what we're considering as part of our housing element proposal. And had 295 parking spaces, 15 reserved for the commercial use. Next slide. And what we found through doing a traffic analysis, comparing it to before, the analysis that was done before the project was occupied and at 95% occupancy, was that we actually saw less traffic during the peak hours, 10 and 12%, than what was assumed prior to the project being constructed. And it contributed relatively little traffic to the intersections of Tamil Vista and Warrenham during AM and PM peak times. The intersection remains at, this is a terminology, but an acceptable level of throughput. And maybe most importantly, with the addition of actually some changes to the signal timing as a result of some analysis we did and study on Tamil Vista Boulevard, actually travel time on Tamil Vista was shorter in the AM peak hour and just 1 second longer in the PM and northbound, and also AM and PM on the southbound. So really, a lot of, you can go to the next slide. In terms of parking, which really hasn't come up as part of the conversation, as part of the housing element discussions we've had, but we did analyze parking as well. Both traffic and parking were concerns of a lot of people before the project got built. This was the parking ratios, and next slide. There was some follow-up with the surrounding property owners, and really this is similar to what we've heard from people more recent workshops. They're not seeing the parking issues or the traffic issues that they had feared would sort of occur as a result of that development. And so I thought, the IJ really highlights this by quoting some of our residents who were initial, were initially critical of the project, and really it was they've lived near it or worked near this project and haven't really seen the impacts that they were fearful of to begin at the beginning of the process. So just to wrap up traffic, if we can, thank you. Really, all of this is to say that traffic is something that the town, through its public works team and planning department, we actively work on and are addressing. As you can see, it's a concern of the towns as well. But we're working on issues both in terms of real investments in bike and ped infrastructure, into road networks for vehicles as well. Also through monitoring and assessing the impact of changes to land uses on the system as a whole, as you can see by the Tam Ridge report. It's certainly something that needs to evolve as the town changes and as regional traffic patterns change around us. But I think we feel that, and I can say with confidence, that this doesn't have to be a decision between addressing housing or addressing traffic. We really can do both at the same time. On the private side, it's about locating and encouraging development near transit, requiring certain public improvements or mitigation as part of development. And then monitoring and assessing on the public side, it's the bike ped improvements, it's traffic engineering projects, and also monitoring and assessing. And I think it's important to note, and I mentioned this earlier, but just reemphasize, in order for us to address existing traffic improvements or projects and try to make things better, a lot of that funding for those roadway reconfigurations are tied to a compliant housing element. So you almost have to do both at the same time. All right, so next slide. How are we doing on time?
We're doing fine. Yeah, we're
okay.
Good. Yeah,
okay,
maybe
good.
Another 5 minutes or so.
So another thing we've heard is, what about these sites are all located in the flood. Most, actually, I think 8 of the 9 sites are located in the flood, FEMA floodplain. And what about sea level rise? And if you go to the next slide, Dave. Certainly, this is something we're very much aware of, and is also a significant concern of the towns, and something that we're really going to have to think carefully about moving forward, as we also consider new development and redevelopment of our existing properties. Just to point this out, if you go to the next slide, the town actually appealed the RENA that was assigned to the town, largely on the basis that the units assigned to Corte Madera would most likely and really necessarily need to be located in the floodplain, given that that's where our larger sites exist. That's where there are opportunities to redevelop some of the older commercial properties and actually promote economic development along with housing. It was a substantial, the town council authorized staff to make that appeal, and it was a substantial appeal with a lot of evidence and information in it. So it's something that the town is certainly aware of and concerned about as well. The appeal was made at a presentation to APAG. This was on September 29th, 2021. Ultimately, it was denied, but this is just to show that this is something that obviously the town is also concerned about and is aware of, and is concerned that we we'll need to consider moving forward. But nonetheless, the town is actually much better positioned to work towards solutions with respect to flooding and sea level rise than a lot of other places as a result of the more than 2-year process to develop the Corte Madera Climate Adaptation Assessment. And that was really where we identified vulnerabilities to flooding and sea level rise, and identified sort of certain strategies or approaches and options to inform town decisions down the road. So, this slide really is just showing that essentially, and this is taking some of the language from the climate adaptation assessment, but these are moving on 2 different tracks, and I think that can be, it's concerning, frankly, for me, but as I think it is something that we're going to have to continue to work on an ongoing basis and make sure that the region as a whole is addressing sea level rise concerns and flooding impacts as a result, to protect communities that do have bayfront properties. So the housing element, I think it's helpful to think of the housing element, really, it's a short-term plan that we're working on. Really, in the terms of the climate adaptation assessment, it's what we're going to be doing is accommodating sea level rise and flooding by raising buildings. All these buildings would be required to be raised out of the floodplain, just as new properties are, or new development is required to do today. On the longer term, in terms of climate adaptation, we're looking at protection measures, and that is to be determined exactly what that is for Corte Madera. But certainly we've identified some options such as engineered infrastructure in the form, and we'll get into that in a second. So here's existing examples of accommodation, raising buildings out of the floodplain. You have parking on the ground floor. That's an example on the left of San Clemente Apartments. On the right, these are right behind me over here in Lucky Drive, where you're allowed to have, again, on the ground floor at elevations below the floodplain level. You have parking uses, non-occupiable uses, and then you walk up to the front doors of the residential uses. You're also allowed to have commercial uses on the ground floor. And then this is more examples of the longer term strategies of protection, which we've talked about at length in the climate adaptation assessment. But it's potentially hybrid approach to not only preserve and restore habitat, but also engineered infrastructure as well on the left, and started to look at conceptual ideas for how to do that in Corte Madera using the smart rail levee or rail line and right away as a potential opportunity at that location. More to be discussed in the future, much more, but the other thing we've heard as well is about water resources. Concern, your approach is great terms, but what about water? And really, this slide, it's not really something, it's a little different. It's not really something that the town directly controls, but it's certainly a concern as well from the town's perspective, and something that we covered in the climate adaptation assessment, but certainly at the very least, understanding and aligning the town's policies and plans with those of MMWD is a critical component of considering additional growth in Corte Madera. That's why we invited Carrie Pollard from MMWD to our second workshop and heard directly from her regarding some of the things MMWD does to plan for the future. And it's certainly something that we will further analyze as part of our environmental review associated with the housing element proposal. Some considerations, though, worth noting is that ultimately any project and any new development has to obtain what's called a will serve letter from MMWD in order to be constructed before they can get a building permit. So if there's no water and MMWD says we do not have water to serve that development, it will not receive a building permit and will not get built. But they do long range planning as well, and they, as we've seen recently in the paper, they may continue to pursue options to supplement the water supply. Another consideration on the waterfront is, that new development will be more water efficient because of new requirements from MMWD, including more water efficiency, efficient appliances and landscaping. And I mentioned this, but this is also something that we'll further study. So really, next slide, Dave. We wanted to at least provide a little bit more context and information on some of these issues. And I think they're all great comments. I mean, this is certainly what we've heard. Again, a lot of support for the approach, but certainly I think ultimately it can be wrapped up and summarized as really the comments wanting to have the town really take a more comprehensive approach and to this housing plan, and certainly we agree with that. But hopefully this provides a little bit more information on those issues that seem to rise to the top in our conversations at our workshops and also at the pop-up workshops, in-person workshops. So with that, I think we want to devote really the rest of the time to hear from you. And these are really circling now back around to what we were trying to get comment on and solidify our RHNA strategy, or the town strategy for meeting RHNA. These are really the important questions. So the sites, have we chosen the right sites with which to pursue and meet our RHNA requirements at the right densities? And then if not, we need to really know alternatives, and that means finding either additional sites, increasing density in one location, reducing it somewhere else would be fine, but we can't just say, no, these sites don't work and we don't have any other options available to us. The reason why this is critical, if you go to the next slide, we're about to embark on our CEQA analysis, our environmental analysis for this housing element project, and we really need to include the sites where potential new housing development and potentially commercial development would occur, and at what density, so how much of it. And that's really the next step, and we need to provide that input at the start of the process so that our consultants, EMC, we have Terry on the call tonight from EMC, but so that they can actually start the work and that we can complete the work in the tight timeframes that are required of us by state law. So that's why we're trying to really solidify this proposal tonight. Next slide. If you look really at this slide, what we're really, to simplify it, what we're really saying is we want to, we have 9 sites on the left-hand side. They all have existing densities for housing today. And we are looking at rezoning proposals that would go from the column on the left, existing, to proposed. And that's ultimately what we need input on. Do we have, comments on that, adjustments to it, and adjustments potentially to the sites as well, although we've heard, again, mostly support for the sites, and that's why we've continued to this point today with the sites, the 9 sites on the left-hand column. With that, I think the next slide, this is a resource. This is just shown graphically where those sites are, and again, the relative densities.
So with that, I don't see any other hand raised, and just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and walk us through, I hope you all can see my screen now, just a couple of the next steps before we send you on your way. So there are different ways to engage, as Adam's been mentioning throughout the presentation. You can definitely provide comments directly to plan staff. And you can do that by going to housing planning or sending an email to housingplanning@tcmmail.org. And Adam did a great job of plugging the project website, which houses all of the great information that has been presented at all of the workshops, including the video recordings and the summaries of those meetings. and that's at cortemaderahousing.org. And we really would love for you to come join us at that one final workshop that Adam will reference here shortly. And then stay involved through notifications. If you want to be on the email list, there's an easy way to do that too, through the project website, and continue to spread the word to all your friends and neighbors.
Yeah. Can we just go, well, go ahead if you're going to do the survey. I want to make sure before people jump off though, that, we really appreciate you sharing and spending the time with us tonight. I do think if you want to share your support for this approach, or any concerns that you do have, there is this an important meeting with the Joint Planning Commission and Town Council workshop. We're essentially going to the Town Council and the Planning Commission next Tuesday, a special meeting at 5 p.m. We also want to confirm that this is an approach that we should move forward with into the CEQA process and the environmental analysis with. So I'm sure we'll take all of these comments and bring them there, but of course, your direct comments to them as well is greatly appreciated. So that is an important meeting if you want to comment on this specific RENA plan. And then we're going to have another workshop where we're going to start to talk about all the other aspects of the housing element, which we started to get into as well. And there'll be plenty of room to talk about Old Corte Madera Square, what specific policies should we do, talk about with Park Madera Center, other community amenities that need to be thought of as we talk about this, the housing element in general, and other aspects of the housing element update. So, and then this will continue on into the summer and for the year, but this is a really critical component of what we need to do as staff to make this a successful project and do so on time. So thank you very much for that, for coming to these workshops and coming tonight and expressing your support and comments on this project.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, good catch. I'm glad you got that plug in before we lost folks. I just want to make a quick plug. We also do have a feedback form that's on the project website and that actually will be distributed through physical printed out surveys or feedback forms as well. And that we actually have a banner up now at the town center with a QR code that goes directly to the website. So we want to make sure that folks that haven't necessarily been in the process thus far, these workshops also have an opportunity to contribute. And there's a special plug that there will be some gift cards as well that will be handed out for those that do take the feedback form as a special motivation, inspiration. Is
that on there? Do we have that on there?
It is, yeah. $50 gift card to Corte Madera restaurants. Top 10 or 10 winners will be picked randomly from that list.
Only one entry per person. No, I don't know if we're checking on that, but it is. I think the important message here is we still want additional people to comment and be involved in this process. The process is still going to go on. This is a key piece of it. Is this how are we going to meet our RENA? But there's still more to do and talk about and get input on. And so we do want to hear from as many more people as we can reach, and we'll be out doing more focus groups and pop-up stuff out there in the community. So we'll see you. Well, hopefully we'll see you in person one of these days.